Our next speaker is Nick Robertson, CEO of ASOS. It's been referenced already. I'm always a bit wary about organisations with initials, ever since doing the news and referring to the popular singing group REM, which I never recovered from. ASOS.com, which he co-founded in 2000. ASOS, as you know probably even better than I do, is an online fashion and beauty retailer which helped pioneer online fashion in the UK and is now increasingly influential on the international stage. ASOS attracts 17.5 million unique visitors a month from 160 countries and has been valued at £1.5 billion. In 2011, Nick was awarded an OBE for his achievements in the world of fashion retailing. And we're delighted now that Nick will give us a short case study of how ASOS approaches online selling. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Robertson.
Thank you, Michael. I like the word short, very short and sweet. Thank you for asking me here today. And it is unashamed. I was asked to do a case study on ASOS, so I will predominantly talk about ASOS, but where I will, I'll kind of interject about some of the thoughts of sort of what the future might hold. So we've been going since 2000, which in internet terms actually is pretty ancient. You know, looking at the figures for Amazon, well, they were only born 4 years before we were, and they're a lot bigger. So you can see how, you know, in a very short space of time, Amazon have done what they've done, and you know, in context to Amazon, we are still very small. What we're doing is establishing this kind of global fashion destination for 20-somethings. I mean, that's the kind of the phrase that best sums up ASOS, and I'll explain a bit more about that later on. What is more interesting to me, and we talked about some of Tony talked about how the business model is changing, and fashion, you know, the internet's transformed lots of things in our life, and will continue to do so. But fashion's a really interesting one because, you know, fashion predominantly has always been really the output of what was local to you. So your fashion shopping experiences were always based on the sort of 2 or 3 stores that you might have had in your local vicinity when you were growing up, and those are the brands that you tended to have allegiance to. And, you know, let's face it, unless you lived next to Oxford Street or next to a big shopping centre, that choice was fairly limited. And actually, fashion, for the people that love fashion, is not about limited choice. It's actually complete polar opposite. Fashion, for the people that love fashion, is about unlimited choice and discovering and new and finding all the things that people aren't wearing as opposed to things they are. So in that sense, the internet really has sort of thrown open the door to what fashion retailing could look like in the future. And that's something I want to concentrate on a bit today. Interestingly, it's giving us a chance to put brands in front of customers that perhaps they wouldn't have had. So today, ASOS has about 850 brands on its website. Now, not all of those brands are UK. A lot of them are UK, but a lot of those are international brands. So go back to my example of how you used to shop for fashion, which was those 2 or 3 fashion stores in your local proximity, or if you're lucky, go down to London and Oxford Street. You know, in one click, you've got the 850 brands that appear on ASOS today. So when we talk about different business models, this is a way for some of these brands to really access and tap into customers that historically they would just not have been able to access because of the cost of either opening stores or printing catalogues or other distribution platforms. So for fashion, it really is a game changer. And what's also exciting for me here is that this isn't just about retailers. You know, yes, ASOS sells a lot of other retail products. Tony mentioned it's also about wholesale business, about the brands becoming retailers. So it's another avenue for them. You know, at the lower end of the scale, it's about us offering, in the way that eBay does and the way that Amazon does, a big shop front for a lot of up-and-coming designers, a lot of up-and-coming boutiques, businesses that would struggle under the normal circumstances, businesses whose size prevent them from leveraging all the benefits the internet can have, and businesses like ours can help them get there. And it's a win-win. We benefit because we put more product in front of our customers. You know, the customers benefit because there's more to choose from, and some of these smaller businesses who would struggle under normal times are now getting a shop window onto the world, which is a kind of win-win for everybody. And as mentioned, we're now selling to about 160 countries, and I'll touch on that a bit later. So it wasn't always great. That was the very first website back in 2000. A couple of you around the room might remember. Our name wasn't ASOS. The ASOS name comes from the 4 words "as seen on screen," which was a slightly odd idea at the time, looking back, which was essentially, as the strapline says there, buy what you see on film and TV. That was the whole "as seen on screen" concept. And Yeah, you're looking at me going, how did we get it this far? Well, survival of the fittest and being very adaptable, we kept moving and changing the business model until we eventually stumbled on essentially what we felt would be the winning category, which was fashion. And interestingly, at that time, there were a lot of big fashion businesses, retailers, department stores, brands that were quite slow on the uptake. So literally, by sort of focusing on one area and pedaling very, very quickly, we managed to establish ourselves slightly ahead of the kind of traditional fashion pack. So that's the ASOS website you see today. I mean, that's only one part. Obviously, behind that, as some of the things Tony was touching on, would be your mobile ASOS, your iPad version of ASOS. You would have your scan to shop within the magazine. So we also have a monthly magazine, which effectively acts like a catalog, where you just hover your phone over, and that takes you straight to the product pages. So all the other bits and pieces around the website. Similar looking to Tony's chart, and these are the real facts and figures now. So amazingly, from a fairly large distribution centre up in Barnsley, in Yorkshire, and the only reason we went to Barnsley was simply because we couldn't find a big enough shed down here in the south, was that we can now get parcels pretty much around the world in time frames that actually make sense to customers locally. So when somebody tells you, it's pretty obvious. If you think about the distance between the UK and New York, that's the same distance from New York to LA. So we can now get parcels to pretty much anywhere in the States on an express service in 2 days, and for free, because we do free shipping, that's part of our model, to pretty much anywhere in the US within 4 days. And if anybody's from the US, you will know that that's pretty commensurate with a US-based clothing or department store retailer. So from the UK, we can essentially service the whole of the US, and all we've now got in the US is a tiny little marketing office in New York and a little returns distribution center down in Atlanta, in Georgia. Similarly with Australia, we're saying 5 days there. That's old news. We can now get parcels down to Australia in 3 to 5 days. So you can see what that is doing to Australian retail businesses that are competing. They can't even do free shipping within Australia. There's some anomaly about Australian postal charges where it's more expensive to ship within Australia than it is to ship to Australia. So we've heard a lot in the press about how the Australian retailers are struggling from this surge now of, they're a very migrant population. They all travel, especially the young. They travel around Europe. They see all the brands on offer. They go home and go, where is it? Because for whatever reason, it's been under-resourced from a retail perspective in Australia. So suddenly they are loving what they can get from Europe. And similarly, obviously, anywhere within Europe we can get to within 2 days. And it's not just kind of, us creating a website and then going there. This is actually, it's not what you might think it is, which would be a kind of satellite view of streetlights down on the world. What that actually is our traffic represented on a global basis. Now think about this. This is a UK-born website that has 7 now language sites attached to it. So we have US, Australia, and then France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And this is showing where our traffic is coming from today, even where we're not even particularly well known and where we haven't got websites. So the highlights for me, you can see how bright Australia is. We've got a phenomenal business down in Australia. You can see how brighter the kind of east coast of America is getting. They're clearly loving what they're seeing. Fascinatingly, you're seeing Russia and China emerging, and it wouldn't surprise me if Russia was our next Australia, essentially, in terms of the opportunity for ASOS. So going back to what was the first website, that was the first little distribution center in Chesham. We picked Chesham for no other reason. We got a map out and kind of stuck a pin in it as being cheap, reasonably close to London, and something not too big. So that was Unit 8. And we've now got that DC in Barnsley, which we believe has capacity for about 1 billion of net sales. But fortunately, because of where it is and the planning, we can actually add to that warehouse. So as every month and year goes by, when we realize we can get parcels around the world quicker than even we envisaged, the shelf life of Barnsley is getting pushed out and out and out. I mean, it's too big. We can never move from Barnsley, but we wouldn't need to put another DC up there right away. We can extend that one. And the good news for Barnsley, we're now Barnsley's biggest private employer. There's 1,500 jobs being created in Barnsley in the last kind of 18 months, and there's no reason why that wouldn't continue. So that's how our sort of sales have grown. I mean, it's the heady days, if you go back back to 2000, we were growing at 70, 80, 90%, but obviously the base was much, much smaller then. So we've still got, we believe, somewhere between sort of 30 and 40% growth per annum left in the business. Now, you can see where the UK being the red bar, UK is more challenging, understandably, for all the reasons we know. But, you know, as Tony was saying, there is still growth. We are still growing in the UK at kind of a sort of higher single digit. So that's part of this sort of structural benefit change. Our 20-somethings are still migrating towards the internet. When Tony talks about sort of 8 or 9% of retail being done in the UK on the internet, if you carve out our target group, which are the 16 to 34, the 20-somethings who love their fashion, and you ask them what proportion of their money they're spending online in fashion, you get figures of 20, 30, 40% back. So that's 20, 30, 40% of a customer's purse is now being spent online in the world of fashion. And that goes back to the points I made right at the beginning. Not because the internet is a more pleasurable experience, simply because if you love your fashion, you're using the internet to be able to discover all these brands, all these things that you couldn't normally get within your local high street. So on the global stage now, and I'm sorry I'm going on about ASOS, but I was asked to talk about ASOS. This is how they kind of compare. And what's interesting, this is now taking global websites, fashion websites, to a 15 to 34-year-old customer base. And what's fascinating here, 3 of those you probably never would have heard of because they're Chinese, and literally they didn't exist 18 months ago. So from 18 months to now, they've now gone straight in traffic terms, to be the most, certainly in the top 10 in terms of a website. 3 in there are US. That will be your limited brands, your Forever and your Nike. You've got a Spanish Inditex, you've got a Swedish H&M, and then good old ASOS is right up there in the number 2 slot in terms of daily traffic to fashion websites on a global scale. And that's a business that was born in London, based in Barnsley, shipping parcels to 160 countries around the world with those 850 brands that essentially we are taking to that global customer base. Now, really importantly, and again, Tony sort of slightly touched on it, it is a complex world, this e-commerce. It's not like retail where customers walk into a store, try it on, ideally walk out satisfied. There are a million things that can go wrong in the journey, and this is where a number of the kind of early adopters into the internet world struggle to comprehend, just in terms of the service level that is required. When that package leaves your warehouse, you're at the mercy of carriers, you're at the mercy of lorries, jackknifing on the motorway, you're at the mercy of planes not taking off. So there are a million things that can go wrong. And it's very important that if you're going to be a serious online player, and Amazon have held the title here for many years, and that shows how serious they put service. They generally put service and retail right next to each other in terms of that customer proposition. And this came out a couple of weeks ago. I was really pleased to see that actually ASOS, from a customer satisfaction point of view regarding service, so this is, have I got my order? Is it accurate? Is it what I ordered? Did it arrive on time? And if there was a problem, was it dealt with customer care and how quickly it was dealt with? We actually topped the polls, beating what I would have said was the bellwether of the UK, which would be your sort of John Lewis and Waitrose. So it's not just about the retail offer, it's also about the service you have to put with it. So finally, we are, in our small way, taking advantage of what is this kind of fashion and digital revolution, and taking what we believe are the best of British and the amazing, if I'd been born in Seattle 15 years ago, we would be a bigger business. But the fact we were born in London, and this business was born in London, London is absolutely, unashamedly and undoubtedly the hotbed for young fashion globally. We have the best young, high fashion, high street in the world, by a country mile. So think about what ASOS can now do. ASOS can put a wrapper around that in the way that a Westfield would do in the kind of physical world, put a wrapper around that UK young fashion high street and export it to the world in a way that customers can now access, in the way that shops can now, or brands can access new customers in ways they just never would have thought of before. If you wanted to sell product in another country 5 years ago, you'd have had to open a store with bricks and mortar. Now, we will write you a check for your stock and take your brand globally. So there is another way to retail. We talked about some of the poor state of our high street. I'm afraid that is inevitable now, because there are different ways that this internet has thrown up that, from an economic perspective, are completely different to the economic models that went before. You can now retail your brand to a global customer, and we will write you a check for it. No more rents, no more rates, no more staff, no more hangers, no more trolleys, no more goodness knows what else a poor retailer has to put up with in order to just start selling their product. That's changed. So there is a huge global opportunity, we believe, not least of all because we're based in the UK, and the UK is the best at young, fast fashion. Frighteningly, today, the UK is only 3% of global internet traffic. Today. We think in 3 years, 4 years, that will be less than 1% of global internet traffic. So for us as a business, yes, we were based in the UK, all our IP will stay in the UK, we will resource in the UK, but actually the customer base and the opportunity is 99% outside of the UK. Thank you.